Hello, and you're watching Benga live. Now I'm joking. I'm here to show you what I do with my dubstep music. It's a new genre. It's a mix between I don't know. Let's not get into that. Let me just show you what I do. The way I work, I've always had like a projects folder because I work with two programs. I have all the save files and all the loops and everything that I've used and all the drum patterns that I've made. So I'm just about to bring that up in my loops as well. Most probably in this song I probably would have started with the lead, which is this. I'm gonna solo it so you can hear it. This is the lead from Pleasure on its own. I used Albino to create this. This is most probably a preset. Sometimes I go through, I have something in my head and I'll go in and I'll make the sound, which I'll show you a bit later, like how I'll go about making some noises and stuff. There's another lead on top, which is another albino. I try and create a lot of space in my music, so I'm always low cutting things. The bottom one will be the stronger of the two. It'll have the most frequency between 200 to 800 sort of thing. Then I'll low cut the main riff about 410, 600. That's how I really create space. I'm low cutting on things. I'm always high passing. That's the main riff. If I go anywhere else, I would have created that riff, and that's enough for me to create a drum pattern, which is when I open up my loops and I'll start loading up loads of different noises, like all my hats and stuff. I'm not one to sample drums, so I've got loads of packs. And here we go. I'll start my riffs off I always make a riff so you can listen to the riff on its own, sort of thing. So I'll have, this will be the whole riff of the hi-hats. I also get, there's always quite a lot of percussion in my songs, so let's hear shakers. Probably wouldn't notice them when they're all together, but there's a lot of shaker riffs in them. Kick patterns. Top of the kick, and then I have the bottom end. Whoa. And I have the snares. And I always use different snares to make up one snare, the body from one snare, top from another. And I never really mix in FL Studio. I bring everything over to Logic as order, and I've got, as you can see, all my audio riffs are one bar audio riffs, but then I'll create a couple of different variations on patterns in Fruit Loops. Then I'll move it onto Logic, and then where I see fit to bring in kicks, sometimes I'll start with less kicks at the first 16 and then bring them in later. But here we go, I'm going to show you how I mix in my Logic, my kick. I'll start off, I'll bring the kick in, I'll bring in one sound at a time, and I'll mix it on its own sort of thing straight away. I don't wait to the end to get in a mix from scratch. It's almost like I mix as I go along. So I'll get my kick, and this is how my kick will start. This is the kick without nothing on top of it. No effects, no EQs. And up to it. Then The low cut on the top is more for automation purposes. Okay. That's it. I've got a parametric EQ. I normally use a fat EQ, but a parametric is when I'm going in for something like precise on the kick. Like it's not really like I want all my kicks to sound the same, but there's just certain things I think don't need to be there. So I'll start EQing, I'll start getting my parametric out. As you can see, it's not as bright as it was before. That's another low cut for automation purposes. I'm doing a parametric. And I think I use an enveloper because things that sound slightly live. So I try and get rid of that all the time. I like my mixes sound really dry. And it's how I bring things in, and I bring in my snare comes in. And if you're looking at my screen, you're thinking, where's the reverb on the snare? I use bus channels. Like I'll have a reverb, like low cut, stereo enhancers, exciters. I always have I always set like my reverb on the bus channel 1. I always set like a tape delay on bus channel 2 and stuff like that. Then it's ready for me to carry on, and I'll have like fat EQ on my snare. I'm always like getting rid of things that don't need to be in things. And then see how I move along. This is what it will sound like on its own. As you can see, low cut. Maybe you might not hear it, but it's like little rumbles and things, and I'm always low cutting. I can't rub that into people enough how much I low cut and low pass. Some things you're looking at my computer, but they're for automation purposes. I get stereo from different things. I use choruses. I use stereo delay, stereo. Those are little things I use. More than mixing as I go along is a big part of how I make tunes, because I see when I go to mix something at the end, I almost don't get the feel of the track for a mix. So I'm always bringing things in one by one. Or sometimes, like, as I'm building the track, I might have just built this on its own. And then, instead of bringing everything in separately, I'll have let me just erase this. Don't worry, it's all saved. And I'll have this. Let me find the project file. And I'll have just the beat if I can find it. I'll have the whole beat, just so I can create other things around it and get everything finished. So I'll have. Then I'll have 4 bars, and I'll start creating. I'd have like a bass line, which my main bass machine is Trilogy. Even if I use an Albino for a mid-range bass, I still will low pass it and then have a Trilogy as my sub bass, because I like the way I can control it, sort of thing. I'm not saying that's everyone's style of thing, but that's my preference. Which is the bass line. Another thing to do with my music is there's a lot of automation going on. I'd say, like, for those that don't know how automation works, this is an empty track about automation, and then once I get my automation up, I can automate every single EQ that I've put on the track, and I can automate all the oscillators. I can also automate what goes on in Albino. Some people, they like to do things as they're going along, like they use touch, where you everything you touch while you're making a song, it records it to the part where you're obviously making it. So I'll show you like a little example of how things work when you're in touch. Got it on solo. A lot to do with myself. It's more like what I'm automating there is a cut off, and it's like cut off is almost like a high cut. Like to explain it, almost not so technically, but what it does is it almost brightens up your sound, takes the brightness off and in and out, and it's almost like it's a mixture of things. Cut off is, and I'll show you what Touch has done there anyway. Let's go back to the read. Where I'd normally draw that in. You can see what it's all doing and play it. That's probably more interesting way to automate what you do if you use Touch. But I'm more, everything has to be really smooth. I don't really like jagged little endings and things like that. So I draw things in. I use my mouse and I automate things like this. You can hear it in the intro of Pleasure. If I play the whole song, you can see how I've drawn it in. Creeping in, that is probably the high cut that I've used, where I've put it in the track, and you might look at a lot of things that's going on and think it doesn't need that much to mix the sound, but a lot of it's put there for automation, like the automation you just heard of that lead getting brought in. If you look, you can see what I've done. I've just planted a 28 hertz on the high cut at the bottom on the 17th bar, sorry, and brought it up to 2000, which is like, you would say, the limit of what people can hear, where it should stand. I think I've told people enough about how I go about building a song, where it comes from, like where my drums will come from, how I get into the music. But then I think more people want to know about bass lines in it. So what I have is I have 3 oscillators. One of them is just a sine wave, just for the bass line. I'll play it on its own. Then I'll have 2 for the oscillator. I mean 2 for the cut-off, thanks for the cut-off to react on, like the mid-range bass, sorry. Which I'll have 1 which is at a different octave. It kind of makes the bass line stronger. You know, people split their bass lines so they can control what it's doing. Like if they want it to be wide or whatever, I'm more do it in my albino, where I've got my 3rd oscillator number 2 and number 1, and then I will send the oscillator 1 and 2 to my filter 1, which is what does the cut off. I'll give you a little example. So say if I started a fresh bass line, which can start from anywhere. I might open up a preset, and then how it starts is I use digital noises like the sines and the spectral waves and the saw bass, which is kind of like wave shapes. I set The numbers on the side here are the octaves. I set it to where it needs to be, where I might be playing on my keyboard. I set my cutoff to where I want it to start. Then let's get to the LFOs. I set my LFO number 2, maybe that's the next 3-1. The sync's at 1-4. The reset, because I'm one of them people, as I said before. I then move on to what I want to modulate, and it's most of the time if you want to get the mid-range wobble, you're gonna go for a cutoff filter, and I've set my cutoff filter number 1. It's just a case of moving up and finding where I need it to be. And the reason why I have to keep pressing the note again is because I haven't got the release set properly. But I'll normally, not the release, like the decay and the sustain set properly. I'll normally do that afterwards because it's one of the things where I don't know where it needs to be until I've played the riff. So like, let's say I get my riffs up. Let's get rid of this. Once again, it's saved, don't worry. This is where the release comes into play because it keeps on dying too early, not the release, the decay and sustain. So see where it dies really early? Now it all leads into each other. See where it kept on like dropping, like the riff, the bass line, the oscillator will sound like it's dying. It's more to do with the decay and sustain and release. I think you already know that I'm talking to amateurs. You know, probably better than me. So you see how I make the bass lines that I come up with. Now it's all, once I've got all bass lines rolling, it's all mixing, and as you can see, as I told you before, I just go along, and most things are already quite set, but then I'll go along and get little levels. I mix at different levels as well, so when I'm mixing like bass lines, I'm mixing really loud. Blow my speakers. But when I'm mixing like tops, I mix quite low, and I'll mix on one speaker. So I'll be like. Right, here we go. Just get rid of the bass line. The reason why I mix tops really low is because I feel I can pick up on what's too low and what's too loud. So I mean, because when it's loud, it all gets like muddled up when it comes to tops for me. So I mix really low, and most of the time I'll have a lot of hats, but as you can see, I've got loads and loads of different hats in Pleasure, but I do a little bit of mixing in Fruit Loops as I go along. I say if I open up a hat, that's not helping. But what I'm trying to show you is when I open up a hat, I automatically set it to a level. It's more like when I mix hats, I mix it kind of roundly, like I'll get them all together and then EQ little bits what I think shouldn't be there, but then when it comes to actually choosing the hats, and it's all just done really quickly, and when I bring it out, I export it as a WAV file into my projects. I save the stuff in Pleasure, and it will get saved, and then I already have, because as I showed you before, I have the whole beat. And then so I know what comes up, I know where I've got to get my kick and my snare from. So I'd already have the box open. As soon as I export it, let's say if I call this, let's call this Future Music. You see what happens and how I go about getting it across the Logic. bring it up. And it's here. I'm gonna clang it up for you. Here, here's a clang. So you see what I do, and then what I do from here is start mixing it in here. As soon as I bring my things separately into my Logic, that's when I start mixing. Moving on from that, I will then start finalising the song, where I don't really mix songs for CD or vinyl. I just try and get an in between. I don't say I know like vinyls will lose a lot of tops when it cuts to vinyl. I won't try and boost things to make things sound better on vinyl. So it's more I get to the point where I put things through bus channels. Like I put everything through bus channel 9. If you look at my kicks and my snares, everything, absolutely everything's through bus channel 9. Like, I suppose we're all big producers here, we can all understand what I'm doing. So then I will get the overall mix level through the bus channels now. So you'll see everything down through number 9. If I need to bring it down, if anything's distorted, I'll bring it down through that. When people mix down their tunes, they know the end result, but then I know the end result to such, like, where I listen to my kick, I think to myself, instead of like putting a massive EQ at the end of it and turning everything up, I kind of work that kick to be at that right level, and that sets the medium for the rest of the mix, sort of thing. That's what I mean. Like, if my kick's EQ'd right and my snare's EQ'd right, it's at the right sort of brightness. I won't find myself coming to the end of the mix and turning the whole mix up, at, like making it brighter and stuff. That's what I mean. But then when it comes to the overall mix, I don't really do much limiting. I do the limiting to a point so it doesn't go past 0. But then, if you notice where I bring all my buses to 9, I've brought everything down so it doesn't distort anywhere. So it's not like I'm pushing it up really loud and then putting a limiter at the end of it. It's more limiter so there's no surprises for the cutting engineers. That's where my vintage warmer comes into play. Where it just stops everything from going mad.
So that's sat on the end of your mix just to make sure there's nothing.
But I don't see it on the master. I've just got like a phobia of putting things on the master, man.
So that's just sitting on the group channel rather than the...
Yeah.
So on the actual master out of your track, there's nothing?
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. I know some, like, people that make house, they put an ad limiter. They, rather than use a vintage warmer or anything, they use ad limiters and stuff, like on the master. But then again, you're getting a really loud mix just from limiting. And when it comes to brick wall limiting, it may seem louder to you, but it's not actually louder. When it comes to a club, it sounds a lot better with less limiting. What I'll do is, once I've got my my main riffs, and that will normally be at 1, but then I'll move it to where I think I want to drop it. I normally drop my tunes after 16 bars, so I'll probably move it to there most times. I'll move my little 4-bar. Looks dodgy how I placed it, but I'll move it to there, and then I'll go about trying to create a melody over the top, or saying somehow how to intro. In this case, we've got this. The automation always comes last, so you wouldn't see the automation do this. I'll start off like that, and then I'll start placing bars around. Before I start automating things, I'll put a 16 of that. It might drop with the melody, like how it does here. It drops with the melody. It will drop with the bass line on my 17 certain times. It's just how strong the melody is to the track. If it's really like punchy, the melody, then I'll keep it running through the drop, and I'll drop it on the 17. It's more about stripping it to parts where I look at it like as a DJ as well, sort of thing. So I'll be stripping the song down to, like, say if I dropped it with the melody, I'm thinking about stripping things that I'd have bass line going along. Everything's done in 16s as well. I don't really do mad off bar 2s and 4s. Basically, I'll start stripping things, so I'll take the melody out. Now, to cut a long story short, I will take it out on the next 16, but I'm just taking it out so it's visible here. This ain't how the song normally sounds, but this is the next 16. I strip out the melody. Then something else might come out, but then as I'm stripping things, I'm automating bass lines and I'm changing the way bass lines do things. I also have the albino with the same settings but on a different sync rate, and I might drop some of the notes down into that sync rate, so I've got the same riff on a different audio channel, and I might just think, alright, I want to lose that, and I want to lose these two, and I want to lose the end one. So I just erase that. So I can see what I've stripped. Turn that back on, turn it off, turn it off, turn them two back on, turn them two off, turn it off, turn it back on, sort of thing. And I get this effect. Which keeps the song interesting. You can see how I work through my songs. When I go about structuring things, it's more about what the song's about. If it's about the bass line, there's more automations on bass line. If it's about the top line, like in Pleasure, there's more automations on the top line. And after I've gone through like structuring my song, I think about breakdowns. I more break things down when I think it's not necessarily doesn't need a break, but it could do with a break, sort of thing. And I always have breakdowns in my songs. Most of the time, it doesn't have to be the obvious down for no beats. It might be down to a different beat or something mental. Maybe just down to the beat on its own or something. But I think it's necessary to do that. It's almost like starting it again. When it comes to endings, I don't do it for DJs, man. Definitely don't do it for DJs, because when I mix, I don't wait for songs to get to the end. They never get to the end. So I do mad things, like I might set the drums out of sync and things like that. So if you sometimes mix some of my tunes, like some of the ones on the album, you'll just get lost. Twister is one of the ones where I set it out of sync and put mad delays on it. It's more, I always set my endings for CDs rather than vinyl. Alright, so like I was explaining how when I drop my song, I drop it after 16 bars, like on 17 and stuff. But when it does come to like structuring, I do have. It's not like always implanted in my songs, but there are certain times that I sit down and write a song and I drop the song for like 64 bars to 80 bars, and I might break it down after that sort of time period, and then after the drop the same sort of period. But then that's not always enforced, but it is like in the back of my mind. It's there. It's almost like a formula. Like people say, formulas, they kill music, but I think it helps you to write songs quicker, and when you can write songs quicker, you get the ideas out, sort of thing. So, right, when I was talking about structuring, I was talking about like arrangements and stuff, and I said I drop everything at 17. Like there are formulas to how I write music. Certain times I might write a 64 beat drop, 64 beat drop, and it will it might happen a lot in a lot of my songs, but it's more to get the song finished quickly. Certain times I might go back and change the way it's structured, but then a lot of the time I will write things from 64 to 80 bar drops, then break it down to something else, and then move to another 64 bar to 80 bar drop again. But then if it helps me to write songs quick, then I can't see why that's bad. I can't see why a formula may be bad in certain situations. I constantly write in 16s, and I'll write a drop for 64 to 80 because I know it works for a DJ to mix in and out of. Like I might bring in a melody after 64 bars maybe, and that's after I think the DJ might have come out of the mix or he's left the song on for a bit longer, so it's something more interesting after that point. I'm really writing for DJs as well when it comes to arrangement, big time. As I'm a DJ myself.